His wife faked a pregnancy to trap him, then confessed after the wedding. What he did with the prenup made her lawyers quit. Daniel, I need to tell you something. I was never pregnant. I faked the whole thing to make sure you'd marry me before you figured out who I really am. Those were the venomous words Nicole Brooks whispered to her new husband during their wedding reception, champagne still bubbling in her glass, completely unaware that the quiet, trusting man standing beside her had already anticipated every move she would make. What happened next will change how you think about deception, manipulation, and the devastating power of being 10 steps ahead. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so completely that discovering their lie felt like the ground opening beneath your feet? What would you do if someone used your love as a weapon? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The law offices of Whitmore and Associates occupied the 32nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. Daniel Brooks sat across from Margaret Whitmore, a woman in her late 50s whose reputation for protecting wealthy clients was legendary. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Lake Michigan stretched gray and endless under heavy clouds. "Mr. Brooks," Margaret said, sliding a leather folder across her mahogany desk. "You've asked me to draft a prenuptial agreement, but the clauses you're requesting are unusually specific. May I ask why you believe your fiancé might commit fraud?" Daniel's jaw tightened. At 34, he'd built a software security company from nothing, turning encrypted code into a $40 million empire. He wasn't paranoid. He was careful. "There's a difference. Just a precaution," he said quietly. "I want to make sure that if someone enters this marriage under false pretenses, they leave with nothing." Margaret studied him over her reading glasses. "The fraud clause you're requesting is quite comprehensive. Falsification of medical conditions, concealment of debts, misrepresentation of employment or assets. If proven, the offending party forfeits all claims to marital property, spousal support, and even their personal assets acquired during the engagement period." "That's correct. Mr. Brooks, this is one of the most aggressive prenuptial agreements I've ever drafted. Most courts favor some degree of equity, even in cases of misconduct." Daniel's voice remained steady. "Then, make it ironclad. I want language that explicitly states any form of deception, manipulation, or fraud during the courtship or engagement immediately nullifies the marriage contract and triggers complete asset forfeiture." Margaret leaned back in her chair. "You understand that proving fraud requires evidence. Substantial, documented evidence." "I understand." She opened her laptop. "Then let's begin. But Mr. Brooks, I have to ask, why marry someone you don't trust?" Daniel turned toward the window, watching boats cut white trails across the dark water. "Because sometimes you need to know for certain what someone will do when they think they've won." 6 months earlier, Daniel had met Nicole Stevens at a charity gala for children's literacy. She'd approached him with confidence, wearing a red dress that turned heads, her blonde hair swept into an elegant twist. Her smile was practiced, perfect, the kind that promised both warmth and excitement. "You're Daniel Brooks," she'd said, not asked. "I've read about your company in Tech Today." Impressive work. They'd talked for hours that night. She claimed to work in marketing for a pharmaceutical company, mentioned her family's real estate investments in California, spoke knowledgeably about emerging technology markets. Everything about her seemed effortless, polished, successful. By their third date, Daniel was captivated. Nicole was beautiful, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in his work. She asked thoughtful questions about cybersecurity, remembered details from previous conversations, made him feel like the most fascinating man in any room. 2 months into their relationship, she'd invited him to her apartment in Lincoln Park. The building was upscale, her unit tastefully decorated with what appeared to be expensive furniture and original artwork. Everything about her life suggested stability and success. "My parents helped with the down payment," she'd explained casually when he complimented her home. "Family money, you know how it is." He did know. Daniel had grown up in a modest suburb outside Milwaukee, the son of a high school teacher and a postal worker. Everything he'd built, came from 14-hour days, ruthless focus, and code that couldn't be broken. He'd earned his success. Nicole, it seemed, had inherited hers. But something nagged at him. Small inconsistencies that most people would dismiss. The pharmaceutical company she claimed to work for had no employee matching her description when Daniel casually searched their website. Her supposed real estate investments in California, when mentioned to a colleague who actually owned property there, didn't match any known family holdings. The artwork in her apartment, while impressive, bore the telltale signs of high-quality reproductions rather than originals. Daniel hired a private investigator, not because he wanted to, but because his success had been built on trusting data over intuition. Marcus Chen was discreet, thorough, and expensive. The report arrived 3 weeks later. Nicole Stevens was not who she claimed to be. Her real name was Nicole Walsh. She'd grown up in Gary, Indiana, dropped out of community college, and had worked a series of retail jobs before reinventing herself. The pharmaceutical marketing position was fabricated. The family real estate wealth didn't exist. Even the Lincoln Park apartment wasn't hers. She was subletting it from a friend who traveled frequently for work. But the most telling detail was her pattern. Marcus had uncovered 3 previous relationships with wealthy men. Each had ended badly. Each time, Nicole had positioned herself as a victim, extracting settlements or gifts before disappearing. Daniel should have ended it immediately. But something in the data gave him pause. Nicole wasn't dangerous. She was desperate. Desperate people made predictable mistakes, and Daniel was very good at predicting patterns. 1 month after receiving the investigator's report, Nicole announced she was pregnant. They were having dinner at his penthouse when she made the revelation. Daniel had cooked, something he enjoyed when he wanted to think. Pan-seared salmon, roasted vegetables, a bottle of Chardonnay he'd been saving. Nicole picked at her food, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly. "Daniel, I need to tell you something." He set down his fork, his expression concerned. "What's wrong?" "I'm pregnant." The words came out in a rush, followed immediately by tears. "I know we haven't been together that long, and this isn't how either of us planned things. But I went to the doctor yesterday, and the test was positive." Daniel felt a coldness settle in his chest. He'd suspected this might happen. The investigator's report had mentioned that one of Nicole's previous relationships had ended with a pregnancy claim that later proved false. "Are you sure?" he asked gently, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I have the test results." She pulled a folded paper from her purse, sliding it toward him. "I'm scared, Daniel. I don't know what to do." The document appeared legitimate. Positive pregnancy test from a women's health clinic, dated 3 days earlier. Nicole Stevens listed as the patient, but Daniel had spent his career learning to spot forgeries, and something about the formatting seemed off. The font didn't quite match standard medical documentation. The clinic's letterhead, while convincing, lacked the subtle security features most healthcare facilities used. "This is a lot to process," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the calculations running through his mind. "But if you're pregnant, we'll figure it out together." Nicole's relief was palpable. She squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "I was so afraid you'd be angry or want me to, end it." "We'll make this work," Daniel assured her. "But let's get a confirmation from another doctor, just to be absolutely certain." Her grip tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. Whatever you think is best." He scheduled an appointment with his own physician, Dr. Patricia Morrison, for the following week. Nicole came up with excuses to postpone 3 times. Work emergency. A sudden flu. Her mother visiting unexpectedly from California. The mother whose real estate investments didn't exist. When she finally agreed to the appointment, she arrived 30 minutes late with another excuse about traffic. Dr. Morrison performed the examination professionally, sent blood work to the lab, and promised results within 2 days. The results came back negative. No pregnancy. No evidence of recent pregnancy. When Daniel called Dr. Morrison privately, she'd been diplomatic but clear. "Mr. Brooks, I can't discuss another patient's medical information without consent. But I can tell you that the documentation you showed me from the other clinic appeared suspicious. If you have concerns about fraud, you may want to consult with legal counsel." Daniel thanked her and hung up. He sat in his office for a long time, staring at the city lights spreading across Chicago's skyline. Nicole had lied. The pregnancy was fake, manufactured to trap him into marriage before he could discover the truth about who she really was. Most men would have confronted her immediately. Daniel made different calculations. If Nicole was willing to fake a pregnancy, she demonstrated a level of deception that needed to be addressed legally, not emotionally. And if he was going to protect himself, he needed to do it completely. That evening, he proposed. Nicole's surprise was genuine. They were walking along Navy Pier, the Ferris wheel glowing behind them, when Daniel dropped to one knee and opened the ring box. "Nicole, from the moment I met you, you've made my life better. If we're going to have a child together, I want to do this right. Will you marry me?" She said yes through tears and laughter, throwing her arms around him while passers-by applauded. The ring, a 3-carat diamond he'd purchased that afternoon, caught the light perfectly. "We should get married soon," Nicole said later that night, curled against him on his couch. "I don't want to be showing too much at the wedding." "Agreed," Daniel replied. "How about 3 months from now? That gives us time to plan something nice, but doesn't put it off too long." "Perfect." She kissed him, her happiness apparently complete. The next morning, Daniel called Margaret Whitmore and scheduled their meeting about the prenuptial agreement. The wedding took place on a Saturday afternoon in October at a historic mansion in Lake Forest. Daniel had insisted on keeping it relatively intimate, only 70 guests, mostly his business associates and a few genuine friends. Nicole's guest list was notably small. A handful of people she claimed were cousins, some friends from her fabricated pharmaceutical job, and her mother who Daniel had never actually met until the rehearsal dinner. Mrs. Walsh was a tired-looking woman in her 60s who seemed overwhelmed by the elegance of the event. She'd pulled Daniel aside before the ceremony. "You're a good man," she'd said quietly. "Nicole's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her," Daniel had replied, meaning something entirely different. The prenuptial agreement had caused the expected resistance. Nicole's lawyer, a man named Richard Sterling she'd hired with money Daniel suspected was borrowed, had reviewed the document with growing alarm. "Miss Stevens, I strongly advise against signing this. The fraud provisions are extraordinarily punitive. If there's any misrepresentation in your personal or financial disclosures, you could lose everything." Nicole had glanced at Daniel, her smile never wavering. "I have nothing to hide. It's fine." "The language specifically addresses falsification of medical conditions," Sterling pressed, "including pregnancy." Daniel had watched her face carefully. Just a flicker of tension, gone almost instantly. "I'm pregnant with his child," Nicole said firmly. "There's no fraud. I'll sign it." Sterling had tried once more. "Miss Stevens, even a miscarriage could be construed under certain interpretations as evidence of misrepresentation if the pregnancy's validity is questioned. This document offers you no protection." "Then I guess it's a good thing I'm actually pregnant," Nicole had snapped. "Can we please just finish this?" She'd signed on every page, her signature flowing confidently across the paper. Daniel had signed opposite her, his expression neutral. Margaret Whitmore notarized the document with the solemnity of someone sealing a tomb. The ceremony was beautiful. White roses everywhere, string quartet playing Vivaldi, sunlight streaming through tall windows. Nicole wore a designer gown that probably cost more than she'd earned in the past year. Daniel wore a tailored suit and an expression of calm certainty. When the minister asked if anyone objected to the union, silence filled the room. Daniel waited, counting heartbeats, giving anyone who knew Nicole's truth a chance to speak. No one did. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." The reception was elegant and carefully orchestrated. Dinner was served in the mansion's ballroom. Champagne flowed freely. Toasts were made, celebrating the happy couple and their future child. Nicole glowed, accepting congratulations with grace and excitement. During the dancing portion of the evening, While guests mingled and the band played soft jazz, Nicole pulled Daniel onto a terrace overlooking the grounds. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. "I can't believe we actually did it," she said, leaning against the stone railing. "Mrs. Nicole Brooks, it sounds perfect." "It does," Daniel agreed, standing beside her. She turned to face him, her expression shifting to something more serious. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you before, but I was afraid." His pulse remained steady. "What is it?" Nicole took a deep breath, her eyes meeting his with what appeared to be genuine fear. "I was never pregnant. I faked the whole thing to make sure you'd marry me before you figured out who I really am." The words hung in the cool evening air. From inside, the band transitioned to a faster tempo. Laughter drifted through the open doors. "I'm not from a wealthy family," Nicole continued, her voice gaining momentum now that the confession had started. "I don't work in pharmaceutical marketing. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and when I met you, I saw a chance to finally be someone better, someone worthy. But I knew if you really knew me, you'd never want me, so I lied about everything. And then I panicked when I thought you were getting suspicious, so I faked the pregnancy, thinking it would lock things down before you could leave." She paused, watching his face for a reaction. When none came, she pressed on. "But here's the thing, Daniel. I know I trapped you into this marriage, but I actually do love you. I love your intelligence, your kindness, the way you see the world, and I think, maybe, if you give me a chance, I can become the woman you thought you were marrying. We can make this real." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. She was still beautiful in the soft light from the ballroom, still composed despite her confession, still calculating behind those tears that were starting to form in her eyes. "Nicole," he said quietly, "that's one of the most honest things you've ever said to me." Relief flooded her face. "So, you forgive me? We can start over?" "No." The word was gentle but absolute. "We can't." Her expression crumbled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've known about your lies for months. The fake pregnancy, the fabricated career, your real background. I hired an investigator 3 weeks after we started dating. I've known exactly who you are from the beginning." Nicole stumbled backward as if he'd physically struck her. "That's not possible. You proposed. You acted like everything was fine." "I proposed because I needed you to sign the prenuptial agreement," Daniel explained, his voice still calm, almost kind. "And you would only sign it if you believed you'd successfully deceived me, if you thought you'd won. The prenup." Her voice was barely a whisper. "The fraud clause, specifically designed for this situation. Falsification of medical conditions, particularly pregnancy. Misrepresentation of personal and financial background. All of it documented by my investigator, witnessed by my physician, and now confirmed by your own confession." Nicole's face had gone pale in the moonlight. "You recorded this conversation, audio and video." Daniel gestured to the small device pinned to his lapel that looked like an elegant tie clip. "Full confession, given freely, without coercion. My lawyer is going to love this." "You can't do this," Nicole said, her voice rising with panic. "I'll say I was joking, that I made it up." "You're welcome to try, but you faked medical documentation, forged a pregnancy test result, and committed fraud to induce marriage. Those are crimes, Nicole. Real crimes, with real consequences." She gripped the railing, her knuckles white. "What do you want from me? Money? I don't have any money. I know you don't. According to the prenuptial agreement you signed, you now have less than you did before we met. What does that mean?" Daniel pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. "It means the prenup includes a provision that any gifts, assets, or benefits received during the engagement period are considered marriage property subject to division. Since you committed fraud, all of those assets revert to me. The jewelry I gave you, the clothes, the furniture you purchased with money I provided, even the ring on your finger." Nicole looked down at the 3-carat diamond, then back at Daniel. You're taking everything. I'm enforcing a contract you willingly signed. There's a difference. I'll fight this. I'll hire a lawyer. You already have a lawyer, Richard Sterling, who, by the way, strongly advised you not to sign the prenuptial agreement specifically because of these fraud provisions. You signed anyway. Tears were flowing freely now, but they weren't the calculated tears she'd used before. These were real, born from genuine fear. Daniel, please, I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to lose everything. You're right. You don't deserve to lose everything. He paused, letting hope flicker in her eyes. You deserve to lose exactly what you tried to steal from me. My trust, my future, my choice. The prenuptial agreement ensures that happens legally. I'm your wife. For now. The annulment papers will be filed Monday morning. Fraud discovered on the wedding day. Marriage never consummated. It'll be like this never happened. Nicole sank to the ground, her designer gown pooling around her like a white wave. Why? If you knew from the beginning, why go through with all of this? Daniel crouched beside her, his voice gentle but firm. Because you needed to understand something. You've spent years manipulating people, using lies as currency, treating other people's emotions as tools for your advancement. Someone needed to show you that actions have consequences. That deception doesn't make you clever. It makes you predictable. So this was all revenge? This was all justice. There's a difference. He stood, straightening his jacket. Inside, the band was playing something slow and romantic. Through the terrace doors, he could see guests dancing, unaware that anything had changed. My lawyer will be in contact Monday morning with the annulment paperwork and the asset forfeiture documents. You're welcome to contest them, but Sterling already knows how airtight that prenup is. If you try to fight it, you'll lose more than you already have. Daniel walked toward the terrace doors, then paused and turned back. For what it's worth, Nicole, I do believe you're capable of becoming someone better, but you can't build anything real on a foundation of lies. Maybe losing everything is the lesson you needed to learn that. He left her there in the moonlight, her confession recorded, her future dismantled, her carefully constructed deception turned into the weapon that destroyed her. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and rain pattering against the windows of Whitmore and Associates. Nicole sat across from Richard Sterling, her eyes swollen from crying, her designer clothes replaced with jeans and a sweater. How bad is it? She asked. Sterling flipped through the documents Margaret Whitmore had delivered that morning. His expression grew progressively more pained as he read. It's worse than I anticipated when I reviewed the original prenup, he said finally. The confession you gave was clear, uncoerced, and completely incriminating. Combined with the evidence Brooks gathered through his private investigator. There's no ambiguity about the fraud, but we're married. Doesn't that count for something? The marriage is being annulled based on fraudulent inducement. In Illinois, that means the marriage is void from inception. It never legally existed. Nicole leaned forward, desperate. So I get nothing? Worse than nothing. The prenuptial agreement's asset forfeiture clause means you're required to return all gifts received during the engagement. The jewelry, the clothes, the furniture you purchased with funds he provided. Everything. I don't have most of it anymore. I sold some of the jewelry to pay rent. Sterling's expression grew more sympathetic. Then you'll need to repay the monetary value. The prenup includes specific documentation of every gift, including receipts and appraisals. How much are we talking about? Based on the itemized list Margaret Whitmore provided, approximately $215,000. Nicole felt the room tilt. I don't have that kind of money. I don't have any money. Then you'll need to work out a payment plan or file for bankruptcy. But Nicole, there's something else. Sterling's voice dropped. The prenup includes a clause about legal fees. If you contest the annulment or the asset forfeiture and lose, you're responsible for Brooks' legal costs, in addition to your own. How much would that be? Margaret Whitmore charges $800 an hour. This case could easily run 20 to 30,000 in legal fees. More if it goes to trial. Nicole sank back in her chair. So if I fight this, I lose more? Substantially more. And Nicole, I have to be honest with you. We can't win this case. The evidence is overwhelming. The prenup is airtight. Your own confession on video sealed it. I would be doing you a disservice to encourage you to fight this. You're saying I should just accept it? Let him destroy me? Sterling closed the folder gently. I'm saying that Daniel Brooks built a trap so perfectly engineered that the moment you signed that prenuptial agreement, you lost. Fighting it would be like throwing good money after bad. The smartest thing you can do is sign the annulment papers, work out a payment plan for the asset forfeiture, and move forward with your life. What life? He's taking everything. He's taking everything you acquired through deception. That's different from taking everything you are. Sterling stood, collecting his documents. Nicole, I can't represent you in fighting this case because I know it's unwinnable, but I can recommend a financial counselor who specializes in helping people rebuild after significant setbacks. If you're interested. She looked up at him, mascara-stained tears on her face. You're quitting too? I'm not quitting. I'm being realistic, and I'm trying to help you avoid making this situation worse. He placed a business card on the desk between them. Call this person. Start figuring out a path forward, because dwelling on what you lost is only going to hurt you more. After Sterling left, Nicole sat alone in the conference room for a long time. Rain continued streaming down the windows, distorting the Chicago skyline into abstract shapes. She thought about Daniel's last words on the terrace. Maybe losing everything is the lesson you needed to learn. She picked up the business card Sterling had left and dialed the number. 2 weeks later, Daniel sat in his penthouse living room, reviewing the final annulment documents. Margaret Whitmore had delivered them personally, along with signed acknowledgement from Nicole accepting the asset forfeiture terms. She didn't fight it, Margaret said, settling into the chair across from him. Sterling convinced her it was pointless. Smart man, Daniel replied. This was quite the operation, Mr. Brooks. I've been practicing law for 30 years, and I've never seen someone execute something this precisely. Precision is what I do. Margaret studied him carefully. Do you feel vindicated? Daniel set down the documents and looked at her. I feel relieved. Nicole could have destroyed me financially and emotionally if I'd let her. Instead, she destroyed herself by underestimating who she was dealing with. Some might say what you did was cruel. Some might say that faking a pregnancy to trap someone into marriage is cruel. I just made sure the consequences matched the crime. Margaret smiled slightly. Fair enough. For what it's worth, the legal community is going to be talking about this prenup for years. It's a masterclass in protective contract law. After she left, Daniel stood at his window, overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Nicole was beginning the process of rebuilding her life from nothing. Part of him, a small part, hoped she would succeed, hoped she'd learn from this and become someone authentic, but mostly, he felt grateful. Grateful that his instincts had been correct. Grateful that he'd trusted data over emotion. Grateful that he'd protected himself before someone else's lies could become his problem. His phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Patricia Morrison. Hope everything worked out the way you needed it to. Daniel smiled and typed back. It did. Thank you for your help. He poured himself a scotch and returned to the window. The city lights were beginning to glow in the twilight, thousands of lives intersecting in millions of ways. Some people built their futures on truth and hard work. Others tried shortcuts, deception, calculated lies. Daniel had spent his career understanding patterns, predicting behavior, protecting systems from those who would exploit them. Nicole had been just another security vulnerability, and he'd patched that vulnerability with the same precision he applied to everything else in his life. The prenuptial agreement sat on his coffee table, every clause exactly where it needed to be, every provision perfectly executed. It was beautiful in its own way, a work of legal art that had accomplished exactly what he'd designed it to do. Protect the truth from those who traded in lies. 6 months after the annulment, Daniel received an unexpected letter. It arrived at his office, handwritten on plain paper, postmarked from somewhere in Wisconsin. Daniel, I know I have no right to contact you after everything I did. I'm writing this not because I expect forgiveness, but because you deserve to know how your actions changed my life. After the annulment, I hit rock bottom. I moved back to Indiana, got a job as a cashier, and started seeing a therapist. I told her everything, including what you said about not being able to build anything real on a foundation of lies. She helped me understand that my entire adult life had been about running from who I really was. The woman I pretended to be with you was just the latest version of someone I thought other people wanted, but you saw through it. You saw me clearly when I couldn't even see myself. The lesson you taught me was brutal, but it was necessary. I'm working on becoming someone authentic now, someone who doesn't need to lie to feel worthy. It's harder than any role I ever played, but it's also the first time I've felt like myself in years. I don't expect you to care, and I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that your precision destroyed my lies but somehow saved me in the process. I hope you find someone who deserves your trust. Nicole. Daniel read the letter twice, then filed it away in his desk drawer. He didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Nicole's journey toward authenticity was hers to walk alone. 3 months later, Daniel met someone new. Her name was Elizabeth Chen, a fellow software engineer who worked for a competing security firm. They met at an industry conference, argued passionately about encryption protocols over coffee, and discovered they shared the same relentless dedication to solving impossible problems. Their first date lasted 6 hours. Their second date was a coding challenge where they tried to hack each other's systems. By their third date, Daniel realized he'd found something he hadn't known he was looking for. Someone who matched his precision with her own, who valued truth as much as he did, who understood that trust wasn't given blindly but earned through consistent action. When Elizabeth asked about his previous relationship, Daniel told her the truth. All of it. The fake pregnancy, the investigation, the prenuptial agreement designed to punish fraud. That's either the most brilliant or most terrifying thing I've ever heard, Elizabeth said when he finished. Which one? Daniel asked. Both. She smiled. But I respect the precision, though I should probably mention I'm actually who I claim to be. Just in case you're wondering. I already checked, Daniel admitted. Of course you did. Elizabeth laughed. I would have done the same thing. Want to see my employment verification, tax returns, and birth certificate? Already reviewed them, Daniel said. Completely serious. Good. Then we can skip the trust issues and move straight to building something real. And they did. Slowly, carefully, with the kind of methodical precision that Daniel applied to everything important in his life. No lies, no deception, no shortcuts, just two people who understood that the strongest foundations were built on truth, accountability, and mutual respect. A year later, Daniel received another letter from Nicole. This one was different, shorter, more centered. Daniel, I'm writing to tell you I finished my degree. Community college, business administration. I got a job in retail management. Nothing fancy, but it's honest work, and I'm good at it. I'm also engaged. His name is Robert. He's a teacher. He knows everything about my past, including what I did to you. He chose me anyway, not because of who I pretended to be, but because of who I'm actually becoming. I wanted you to know that the lesson took, that your precision, as brutal as it felt, gave me something I couldn't give myself, a reason to stop running. Thank you doesn't cover it, but it's all I have. Nicole. Daniel read this letter once and then shredded it. He didn't need closure from Nicole. He'd already moved on to building something better with someone who deserved his trust. But that evening, as he sat with Elizabeth reviewing security protocols for a new client, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Not vindication, not pride, just the simple peace that comes from knowing you protected yourself wisely, taught someone an important lesson, and emerged from betrayal stronger and more careful than before. What are you smiling about? Elizabeth asked, looking up from her laptop. Just thinking about how precision pays off, Daniel said. In code or in life? Both. She smiled and returned to her work. Outside the window, Chicago glittered with evening lights, thousands of stories unfolding in thousands of ways. Some people learned from their mistakes. Others repeated them endlessly. The difference was in the details. The precision, the willingness to face hard truths and change accordingly. Daniel had built his life on understanding those differences. And now, finally, he'd found someone who understood them too. The prenuptial agreement remained in his files, a reminder that protection wasn't paranoia, that trusting data over instinct could save you from devastation, that sometimes the kindest thing you could do for someone was let them face the full consequences of their choices. Nicole had tried to trap him with lies. Instead, she'd trapped herself with the perfect legal mechanism designed to punish exactly what she'd done, and in losing everything, she'd finally found something worth keeping: the truth about who she really was. That, Daniel thought as he looked at Elizabeth working beside him, was justice, not revenge, not cruelty, just the natural consequence of deception meeting precision. And precision, as always, had won. Viewers, do you think Daniel was right to set this trap, or did he go too far? Should Nicole have gotten a second chance, or did she deserve exactly what happened? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about betrayal, justice, and the power of staying 10 steps ahead.